Hey, everybody, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, bestie, you have an amazing smile. Hope you're having a great day. You see what happens when you subscribe. You get a bonus greeting on every episode. On this episode, we talk to Avril Sisk. She is a phenomenal ethics and compliance governance person. She now serves on a number of different boards, and she has a lot of really cool frameworks. Her story is phenomenal, but she has a lot of really cool frameworks on how to build your career and not get stuck. She's somebody who has continued to climb the ladder of her career, and she's really generous and forthcoming with all the tactics and strategies that she's utilized along the way. So you're definitely gonna get a lot from this episode. It's a phenomenal one. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey, Avril.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I hope you're feeling well. You're looking good.
Thank you very much. Day by day, getting a little bit better, you know?
Great.
How's your day going today?
It's been going well. Just a couple conferences, phone calls, the whole thing.
The whole thing. It's a day. You're having a day.
It's a day.
Yeah. So I've been real excited to get you on. I followed you on LinkedIn for a long time, and it's so good to connect and kind of dive into your story.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to do it.
So let's just kind of talk about how you got into this game. You kind of occupy a unique space in our industry, but I love always kind of hearing, backstories and how you found your way into this area.
Great. Thank you. I'm an independent director, and I know that my path has not been a usual one, but I really like it. I've been on several advisory boards, and the one I'm on now is a technology company, but also a couple of nonprofits. I look at the fact that I'm no longer in an operational role, and that's okay. You have to give up something to get something new, right?
Right.
I'm formerly an attorney, and I was, active for many years, but there's some times in my path where I wasn't practicing law. I was like, at one point, an executive in a nonprofit, so it just depends. And you wear different hats, and you move to different things, and you learn all you can in whatever aspect of the work that you're doing. I found it super interesting to be the chair of a nonprofit that was in transition most recently, where we went from 18 to 32 million under advisement in our donor advised funds in the 3 years where I was in leadership as chair and 1 year as vice chair. And I was also the chair of the Economic Development Commission in my community. So everything having to do with business development, business attraction. We are a 5G smart city here in Arlington, Virginia, the National Landing Section, and all that happened during my tenure. So it was just a really exciting way to go and to see different industries and how they are part of an ecosystem. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you got to kind of get some exposure to these different industries and what they value and what they're looking for in a new home or in a new, economic area.
Exactly. And the focus that I had in particular was workforce too, because I wanted to see that, while new people are going to come and join these companies, there are already people here in this community that could benefit, and we could say what we said to the new companies. We do have a workforce for you. So developing that.
Gotcha. So how did you go about developing the workforce, or was that something that you kind of brought to this committee that you were a part of, this sort of focus on the workforce? And I just want to get down to the root of that, because that's obviously an important piece of the puzzle, right? You can't bring your business somewhere if you don't have people to work in that business.
Exactly. We were focused on tech workforce at first, and I was vice chair, and I ran the workforce task force. And we got the idea from one of our task force members about an apprenticeship program for tech to get people into jobs, to pay them so they could learn it and they could do career switch. It could be somebody new coming right out of school that doesn't have the experience, because, chicken or the egg.
Yeah,
well,
totally.
I'm a software guy, but I don't have the experience. Or it might be someone changing careers, or someone coming back to work after having been away, or veterans. We just had a variety of people in our programs. And when I pulled that together and I made a presentation to the whole board, and then we wanted to take it to the county board so they would help us fund it to get it off the ground. One of the people on my task force invited me to be on his board. He's a CEO, a tech CEO, and said, I want to do this through my company. Can you come and help me? So I was on that board for about 4 years. That was my first paid board. The other ones I had been on were nonprofits, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. But this was another thing. I was on that board for about 4 years, and then it was acquired. And so I'm no longer with that company. I'm with another tech company now, but it was a great experience to see it grow. And the acquisition was something that we wanted, and it worked out really well.
Man, I'm so glad. I mean, we kind of are jumping right into this topic that I was really excited to talk to you about, because I talk to a lot of people that are very interested in at some point getting on a board, and they kind of don't know how to do it. And I think you probably have you're a success story in doing that, right? You got involved with some nonprofit boards and some probably volunteer positions that allowed you to kind of build up those muscles or something, and put yourself in a position to now transition over to these sort of company level boards.
Yes, I think it really was a period of trying to decide where did I want to end up and kind of working backward. Let me say that I've been on nonprofit boards, I don't want to say 30 years, doing different things. But I decided this round I was going to get into leadership because, I've been on boards, but I didn't chair a committee maybe in the past. Or if I did, that's where I stopped. This time I said, I'm going to get on the audit committee. I'm going to chair NomGov, right? And so nominations governance, I'm sorry. And so you get those experiences, you bring people on, you see what our skills matrix looks like. All of these things are directly applicable to a private company board, which is where I went. I also got in the hopper for the succession plan. I was the vice chair. And we had a change where we needed to do a CEO search. So I was chair of the search committee, a national search for the CEO. So when we put out an RFP and we got companies to come and pitch to us, and I was one of the people that helped decide which search firm we'd go with. And then we did the search. So that's a very important role on a private board or a public company board, selecting the CEO. But these are things that I hadn't done in former nonprofit roles, right? But I wanted to get the experience. And then I worked very closely with a reorganization of the organization. We cleaned up our back shop. We wanted to be competitive with Vanguard in terms of our donor advised funds. And so what happens is when people come to us, they pay fees to Vanguard, they pay a few fees to us, but it goes into the pot for community building. And so we have to make a great case in a community foundation. Come to us, you'll get the same service. If you want to see your latest output, if you want to see where your donations are going, hit the button, we'll get it to you. In the past, we had a little more cumbersome back shop. And I wanted to make it so that we could be attractive to a great CEO. And we were. We went ahead and we hired a fractional executive to help us do that. And I was very involved in all of that. So, those are skills that I learned. And I did that alongside my regular day job, right?
Yeah,
but that
right.
was like, evenings, weekends, doing that sort of thing. And then at the same time, I was selected by the legislative body in my county to serve on a county board, a commission. And so I'm moving up in leadership there too, because I said, I never want to do this again without moving into leadership to figure out how it really works. And so I became part of the executive committee. That's where I took on the role as a leader of the workforce task force. So, you're in these settings where you're running it, and then you're bringing in outside executives to kind of talk to you about what you're doing. And then you are able to make a presentation to the county board, and they decide to fund it. And that was based on the work that our commission task force did, but I led it. And then I got up and gave the talk. And so they said, okay, well, how many dollars do you need to get this going? And then I used my government relations experience in that role. But then on the board that I joined, I used it to reach out to other governing bodies in the area to get them to sign on and put some money into it. Because, my CEO is a tech CEO and he hadn't done any of the government relations. And so I know what the legislative calendar is. I know who to call and when to call. And I say, well, I'd like you to come in and do a tour of our facility, but I know what their calendar is. and I can make it convenient. And I said to them, we're creating taxpayers. I go right to the pain point. Like if I'm asking for money from the state or from a county, they say, well, why? And I said, well, I'm creating taxpayers. These are people who can pay higher taxes than they used to because they got a better job. And so zeroing in on what they will want from what I'm offering is a big piece of pitching business and getting people to come along with you, and I talked about our process so they understood our compliance part of it. Like, how do we make sure that our grant process is congruent with yours? And so like that's important to them. And my mentioning it lets them know, okay, we're not going to get in trouble working with them. We're not going to get in trouble working with that company.
Yeah. And I think in order to be actually persuasive, whether you're inside of a company or you're in, a nonprofit, whatever, you're persuading another human being. And if we can't frame what we're trying to pitch in terms of what they care about, we're never going to get what we want, which is their endorsement or whatever. Mm-hmm. So where did that light bulb moment come from for you? Is that just the way you've always looked at the world? And, I'm asking about your knack for being able to like say, well, they're going to care about compliance and they're going to care about, our grant process and whether that conflicts with the pre-existing grant process that they already have. And they care about tax dollars and the funding that's going to come from the workforce. So I need to bring something in about that. Like, was that instinctual? Was that just a knack that you picked up just over years of, getting things done that you need done? Like, talk to me about that, because what you described is exactly what I'm always talking to people about. Our job, it doesn't matter what job you have, you're in sales. You're trying to sell an idea. You're trying to sell a project or an initiative, right? That takes other people's engagement, because we're not in a manufacturing economy anymore. We're in a knowledge work economy, and we need humans sort of voluntary compliance, for lack of a better word. So like, tell me where that came from, that knack you have.
Well, let me say that I've always been someone who tries to make things clear to people. And I would say initially, when I was a legislative consultant, all the tax bills in California came past me when I was a consultant to the Revenue and Tax Committee. And so you have to figure out, all right, what does this do and how does it help you? That's what you say to people. Or if you're asking them for an idea, you say, what do you want to see in the tax list this year? What are you interested in? And so taking and exchanging information, really listening carefully. But I also felt that, when you are speaking about how to get something done, you have to know something about the other people's process. And that takes a lot of listening. You ask the right questions to draw them out because sometimes they might be the head and they don't really know how it works. And so what I do is I give them options. Is it like this or is it more like that? So that we can be sure we're speaking the same language.
Right.
I also was an attorney. And I was a judge, and I didn't feel that my job was done well if people went away from our interaction not knowing what happened.
Okay.
I've got levels of understanding about legal issues. So I need to speak to your level of understanding. I need to make it clear. I might have a client. He might be a teenager. His mother and dad want to know what happened. He wants to know what happened. Now, I need to make sure that they go away knowing what their options are and what they are required to do. I was I did everything from juvenile court to civil and criminal. And that's super important because people come in, they're already anxious and nervous. And so you've got to say, well, this is the ruling and this is what you're required to do. And if you have a question, ask me. And so then I can kind of figure out, did it go totally over their head? Do I need to have some court officer walk back with them and explain some more? Or do they understand what I'm saying? And I have to be clear and I have to be listening. And I have to look at body language. A lot of the work we do now online, I've had to get good at that because it's flat. And I need to see your body language, but also who else is in the meeting. I want to see the body language and the facial expressions of all the people I'm pitching to.
Yeah, which is hard sometimes because camera's off and all of that. But that drive for clarity has that always been kind of part of your personality? Because what I see a lot, like I just see business just seems more complex than it's ever been. And everything is just so complex. It's like everything's moving so fast and it's so complex. And then we have this added sort of dynamic, this complication, I'll call it, of like being remote and kind of communicating through a screen. And on that sort of like landscape, I've just found that like 90+% of like conflicts are due to some kind of a miscommunication, some kind of lack of clarity. And it just, maybe that's always been true, but it just feels like in today's day that risk of, or like that risk of opacity or that miscommunication risk, it just seems so much higher. So like, how do we develop that muscle? Is it just this simple intentionality of like tuning into it? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do we overcome this? Because it feels like there's a new kind of headwind that's hitting us all in terms of our effectiveness.
Well, I think it's a really great question. And I think that we were already maybe moving a little bit away from listening and hearing, not just letting the sound go past your ear, but engaging your mind with what is being said. That's the listening part. I will tell you that I know that many individuals and companies struggle with the back to office. And I'll tell you, I have a mixed view of it. I'm thinking that, yes, you can get a lot done by yourself, but I also think that there's a growth that has to happen in the interaction, particularly when you're talking about sensitive issues, legal issues, compliance, HR. When someone's not going to be happy with what you say, because as I said, as a judge, I'm not doing my job if, everybody's happy with what I do. That you can't be a good judge in that setting. So I know that 50% of the people will go away unhappy or displeased. And so that energy that I put into being understood and explaining my why and drafting an order that's real, that people can understand it when they read it in language that's not legalese. They need to be able to take it away and get what I'm saying. And so contracts have to be written in a way that people get the understanding or they know what to ask about. I would say that we have so many multi-generations in the workforce now, okay? Mm-hmm. And I'm suggesting that we need meaningful meetings every time we get together so that if you're ordering people to go back to work, there's somebody there for them to interact with. And the senior level people and mid-level people have to be inconvenienced and come in so that there is a way to exchange this information, to learn how to be at work, to learn the body language of working together and disagreeing and not being disagreeable. We've got some of the boomers are still in the workforce. You've got Gen X, you've got millennials or Gen Y, you've got Gen Alpha who will be in the workplace within the next 6 to 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
So everybody's communicating differently.
And those are all very different, to your point.
Absolutely. They're all really different ways that they have been brought up with communication. And so what we're going to have to do is find ways to do some cross-pollination and all that. And if you're not together, you can't do it. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I would encourage, and I say this to young people all the time. As I said, I am somebody who is one of the folks who've been in the workforce and seen it for a while. You will miss so much. You don't know if the meeting's really over when they say meeting's over. There could be people still on the call and you've missed it.
Yeah, and the real meeting might happen then.
Exactly. You need to bump into people in the hallway. You need to hear what's being said in the lunchroom or the coffee room. I will tell you, early in my career as a woman and a woman of color, I showed up at meetings that I hadn't explicitly been invited to, but I had not been disinvited. I heard about it and I went and I said,
for you.
This is the coffee clatch where people are making work decisions. And they look around, they say, oh, hi, Avril. And I'm like, hi, how you doing? No, they're wondering who invited her. And I said, I invited myself because this is work that's going on. And maybe you didn't want to exclude, or you just didn't think of me. Yeah. And I wouldn't have heard about it until I heard you guys talking about it. Or there's a conference I might want to attend. So I hear you talking about it. I go back to my desk and I look it up and I said, well, let me put in for that. I can go to that. That would be great for me. I
So,
need to
so
meet people.
we're talking about a way, like your way of being is you're just going to go and get it. You seem
Yes,
like a
yes.
kind of closed mouths, don't get fed person. I'm that kind of way. Like no one's going to advocate for me. I got to advocate for myself. I found
Yeah.
though that a lot of us in our industry, in this ethics and compliance and HR industry, we really have a hard time with that. And so I've used this image before of, a lot of us feel like we're at the kiddie table but we're kind of tweens, and we're looking over our shoulder at the grown folks table where where all the jokes are happening and that's where all the fun is happening. And man, I really should be over there, but no one's invited me over. I look at the table and there's no spot for a chair.
Mm-hmm.
What I advocate for is like, well, you got to grab your chair and you got to pull your chair up to the table. You got to go and
That's
sit
true.
there. If you should
That's
be at
true.
that table, what are you going to do? Just wait until you're 17, until your knees are over the kiddie table and you look like an idiot? No, you have to advocate for yourself. So how do we help people who struggle with that? Because a lot of people in our space are very others focused. They want to leave the world better. They want to serve other people, right? These are all positive qualities that make the world go round and make the world better for the generations that are coming behind us. You know what I mean? But how do we help people get that confidence to get over that hump to attend a meeting that they haven't been invited to, that to your point, they haven't been disinvited to, or to raise their hand and say, hey, I really want to go to this conference? Like, is it just merely having the confidence in yourself to say, hey, this would be good for the organization and I feel like I'm articulate and, fluent enough to make my case? Is it that? Is it just the boldness to like advocate for yourself? Like, how do we get this aspect unstuck? Because I'm asking this in sort of a broader question. I see a lot of impact that we could be having with our programs inside of our organizations or on our workforce that are not made because we don't have this boldness to step to, quote unquote, proverbially, whatever that word is, step into a meeting that we haven't been invited to.
Well, I think that part of it is my personality, but also because of the time I entered the workforce. If you remember, like there were so many unwritten codes, and I think in
Right.
every generation there's unwritten codes, but I'm in there trying to figure it out. And I said, I need to become fluent really quickly. I need to, and if you're in a meeting and they say, well, you shouldn't be here, you say, well, I just thought that it connected to, and I have a reason. If they still don't agree, I'm cool. I'll leave.
Fine. Yeah.
But I have to make my case. I have to be able to say why I think I need to be there. And that has to be, no one can write that script for you. If you're choosing to insert yourself, you need to have a reason. And then somebody might go, yeah, she is right in that line of yeah, let her do that. We need her. We need that office to be represented here. Okay.
Right.
They didn't think of it. They were going to have to go and distill it to somebody later. Isn't it better to have somebody in there who was in there?
Yeah. Right.
Right. But I would say that we have to, as compliance people, ethics people, make the case for business because, the making the world better, close to my heart. I was a public defender. Okay. I was an executive with the YWCA, making lives better. But I also understood that, when I was an executive with the YWCA, I had to make the books balance. And I had to talk about what do we need to serve our population. And I had to get in front of the board and say that this is necessary, right? And I had to make those cases. But I just want to talk about us as an industry, as a community, create conditions for business growth and building trust. Talk about that.
Yeah.
Strive to create a place where talented people come together to accomplish the work. Okay, because like accomplishing the work, it's not just the review of the ethics rules. It's not just the filing of people's conflicts of interest. The work is the whole business, and so you have to see yourself as part of accomplishing the work. And then people say like, okay, all right, ethics helps us complete the work. And you got to be able to explain why that is. I've left organizations that I felt weren't up to my standards. I tell people don't create ethics refugees, right? And I heard that expression maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I said, ethics refugees, people who go from organization to another one because they're not feeling like the work is being integrated with the ethics and compliance enough. And they feel like either they're vulnerable to lawsuit or they are vulnerable to getting fired, being the head that rolls because no one's seeing it. And if you can't, and that's a message, if you can't break through, maybe this isn't the right spot. But you have to do all you can to do the breakthrough, okay? Maybe
Yeah,
before
right.
you give up, right? But I want to say that ethics leaders deal with a range of challenges, from getting enough budget, to gaining executive buy-in and garnering the cross-functional support. And then I say that you have to show your impact on compliance risk. Show what you avoided.
Yeah.
Use other companies as examples, saying we're on top of this. Look what happened over there, right? And you want to talk about ethical culture and business conduct being good for the business and maybe a differentiator within your industry, right?
Right.
If everybody knows that this bank has been making fake accounts, you be the one that doesn't do that. And you got to say it.
Yeah, you got to take credit for it.
Yeah, and get the
100%.
credit. But we weren't in that. That's not us, right? You have to be able to say that. And you want to provide information to the leadership on more than just a narrowly focused view of ethics and compliance. You say, how does the work that I do affect the strategy and the profitability and the reputation of the corporation? Because
Right.
I think that's where we're missing. We are maybe being put into a box within that we're totally interior facing. I don't buy that. We're exterior facing. And when I was in the government and I was trying to make some changes in how we delivered ethics to the whole agency, I had to say it just like that because a lot of people didn't see it. And it
Right.
took me maybe 18 months or so to get the buy-in. But then I also went ahead and above people that were right above me who gave me a look like, how dare you? We've talked about this. You're not supposed to say that. But we had a new, it wasn't the general counsel, it was somebody else who was doing a walking tour and wanted to find out, what aren't we doing? And I said,
They asked, hey, I got an answer. Yeah.
I did. And a guy that had supervised me chimed in, yes, Avril's been talking about this for a long time. And and to make it short, I just said, you're vulnerable everywhere, not just the high level appointees. You need to train everybody and give them a place to go with ethics questions. The guy in the mailroom wants to do the right thing, but if he doesn't know what it is, you'll be on the front page of the Washington Post, and he has a perfect defense because you never told him. I was a defense lawyer. You never told me I couldn't do that. So of course I did it. Right?
Right.
That's everybody in the organization. So making a case for culture change, making the case that if you make the paper, maybe Congress will take you over and run you. Don't
Right.
you want to run the agency yourself? I mean, like that happens.
Yeah.
I think that in a private setting, you could do the same. You said, well, you'll be eating for lunch. It won't be Congress that takes you over. You'll be acquired by somebody else because you're battered and beaten down and you're in front of the regulator. And it's just going to take all your energy to meet the regulator's demand when they do reviews rather than doing the business. And so thinking about what keeps me up at night as an ethics person, but what also keeps people in the chain above me up at night, and how can I help them sleep better?
How can you connect? Yeah, how can you connect them?
Yes, how can I connect them, and how can I say what I do needs more resources so that what you do is not vulnerable?
Yeah. Like you just kind of remind me of a running back. So like a good running back, they get the ball and they got a route that they're going to run and they hit the line, and that line, there's no hole there. Well, they'll find a hole because they have that like constant forward pressure and that like intentionality of like, I got to get some more yards. I got to get down the field. And that's what I was kind of envisioning with you, because you're like, I'm going to find a way through this. I'm going to find a way over this line. I might jump it. I got to go around it, whatever. I'm going to find that opportunity when this guy is walking around and he asks the question to take advantage of it. You kind of seem like you've always been that way. Like you seem like a real vision person. You have a vision for the world. You have a vision for your life. And something I talk about, something I'm struck with you is it seems like there's a lot of intentionality between your moves. You're not just kind of like, some people are just like kind of randomly doing things. You don't seem that way at all. You seem kind of opposite of that. And something I talk about a lot is like, you're never going to wander to the top of a mountain. You're not just going to like randomly wander to the top of the podium at the Olympics, right? That takes a tremendous amount of like vision. It takes a tremendous amount of work and intentionality. the ability to step out of yourself and see how you might, scientifically kind of have that out of body experience and consider how you're engaging with folks and where your wheels are slipping and where you're not, getting the traction that you'd like to get. Is that how is that? Like, is that an accurate read of you? And like, if it isn't, say, don't tell me, just kidding. No. Is that an accurate read of you? And how can we get more of that? Because I think some of that is in all of us. And I think some of us, we turn it down because of our life experience or getting jaded in work and stuff like that. How do we get folks to turn that up? Because there's always a way through, in my mind. There's always a way through that line. You can always get a couple extra yards.
Well, I think I am that way. I'm a strategic thinker, not just for my jobs, but for my life.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, somebody said to me, you could have lost your job doing that. And I said, well, sometimes I'm in a situation where either the job has to change or I have to change. Because like I said, we're vulnerable here. Who's going to be in trouble when it goes bad?
Good point.
And,
right.
and I'm like,
Right.
well, I'm not going to let this be something where they say your office didn't do. I'm gonna say, well, I tried to, but
Right.
you got to be able to say, I can go someplace else. I could, and I'll tell you, I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm following my curiosity. And see, sometimes my curiosity takes me to a place where I see, oh, there's vulnerability here. We got to do that. I'm curious about how this is fitting together.
Right.
And it's taken me some wonderful places, the curiosity. But I've also learned when it's time for me to move on. I try not to overstay in a role. And I think that's super important because when you get used to something, and if it's not quite where you want to be, it's easy to just get used to it, right?
Yeah, you can just inertia. Inertia gets all of us.
Well, it does, but it also means that, okay, have I learned everything I can? Have I done everything I can? Look,
Right.
I'm looking as the lifelong learner, right? And when I stayed in a place for a long time, what I was doing was in my outside activity, getting a lot of other skills, right? Because I know this job well. So now I have enough confidence to go do some other stuff and learn that at the same time, so that might be a reason to stay someplace longer because, I've got this, and I want to get something else. So I do that. But I have to say, I've had to develop sort of an understanding of myself, right? Because early on, I had some pretty aggressive supervisors, and I had to look out for myself, and some peers who attempted to overstep, like they wanted to be my supervisor. I said, nah, we're peers. And so I had to look out for myself. And I don't know whether that's a regular occurrence for lots of people in compliance, people trying to tell you your job, people trying to be your supervisor when they're not. Okay. And you're like, back up.
Yeah.
You got to do it in a way that you can keep working with the people, but you got to back them up because you'll be doing their work. They'll make you do it because you're a pushover.
That's
or
right.
you are somebody that has the boundary muscle isn't strong enough.
Yeah.
And I'll just ask a question back. I said, is this my responsibility? That's a good one. Just ask it. And then the next question that hangs in the air is it your responsibility to give me my responsibilities? That's hanging in the air. I don't have to say it. You know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Right? And so duties as assigned, duties as needed. I get it. But you could be swamped with that and you don't do your main thing at a high level.
Yeah,
So
you're doing 5 things and a half, you're doing 5 things halfway instead of the 3 things to the full way or something like that.
And then that's your review.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody who says, well, you didn't do all that. We said, well, I did all this. And they said, well, I didn't ask you to do
We're
all
like,
that.
I didn't ask you to do that. Right.
That's not part of your purview. So what were you doing that for? Well, so-and-so gave it to me. No, that's not going to work.
Right.
You want to be able to say that my part was done well and I'm assisting people where necessary, but I'm not doing their stuff for them.
Yeah.
You always want to be a coworker that'll help people, but
sure.
you don't want to do what they're supposed to be doing, and as I said, I had to get that muscle early because I had people that wanted to run me and they weren't in the position to do that. And I had to see that as a young professional. I'm like, I don't know. So
you just had the instinct, like your spidey sense went off with that.
It did, but I guess I had also been in situations where, maybe people just assume I know something and they don't tell me very much. And so I'm listening really hard in meetings and in the hallway and finding out what other people are doing. Like I may not have the ability to ask you because I don't know you well yet, but I'm watching, I'm seeing, what are you doing? And is all the boring stuff coming to the newest person?
Mm-hmm.
And then what you want to do is, okay, I don't want to be the newest person. Let me kind of push some of it back or get them to hire somebody else so it can go down because I don't want to do that. But,
Right.
this is maybe funny the way I tell it. And it may sound like I'm super aggressive. I think that I was defensive in those settings. I'm not after you. I'm taking care of me.
Yeah.
I'm making
You're
sure
guarding your own time.
that my part and my brain space is used to get good at what I'm supposed to be getting good at.
Right. Yeah. One of the worst things that can happen, particularly for these, what I'll call like a nestled function, compliance ethics is absolutely a nestled function versus, I don't know, sales, which is not nestled. It is like its own kind of beachhead. There is a risk for these nestled functions to turn into like janitorial functions where you're just like, here, clean this up, here, do this stuff I don't want to do. And to your point, if you don't have a clear picture of what your actual mandate is, or even worse, even more important, if you don't have a clear vision of what your life, your career, what your program should be, and you're not striving toward that, well, then there's a lot of room for like a boundaryless plane. And that's really what we're talking about. Like it's just a bunch of decisions, right? Our life is a bunch of bets. We make a bunch of bets. We make a bet on how we spend our time, our day, our career, our job. You know what I'm saying? Like we're making all these bets. And if we don't have clear lines around what matters and what doesn't matter, you start making a lot more bad bets. You start taking on stuff that, to your point, might not actually move the needle in the context of your purview or what you were actually hired to do. And I think it's a big risk that a lot of compliance people find themselves in because they just end up living in this sort of reactionary mode. And the image that I have in my head is like a ship where we're just bailing water out of it as fast as we can. It's like, at a perfect rate to correspond to the water that's coming in the hole. Like there's a hole in the hull, water's coming in, we're just bailing it out. We're not making any progress. We're not kind of moving across the ocean faster. And I just think that ability to create boundaries is critical, but I think it needs to come from a point of strength, a point of clarity. And maybe I'm just kind of circling back to this term of clarity. I like that framework that you just kind of shared. What would you tell somebody who's finding themselves in that kind of a role or in that kind of a situation? And maybe they've been in that situation for a couple of years because they haven't realized that all this crap is just sort of rolling down the hill to them. You know what I mean?
What I would say is you have to sit down and make an assessment. Like think back to when you first came, what they told you were hired to do. And then you talk about, well, what has changed in the organization where they've added some things or taken some things away? Because you also want to be cognizant, are they taking away the good and interesting stuff? Like,
Right.
are they taking, like when I came here, I was attracted to X and Y, and now I'm only doing Z, like you want to be alert to what's going on in your organization. And that can be a spidey sense of, are we getting ready to get downsized here? All the good stuff is going someplace else. Or are they kind of banking us in the corner for a minute till they figure out what we're supposed to be doing? And see, those are the kinds of messages where I said, well, I need to go to more conferences then, because I'm bringing back data and information. Other people may not be interested in going to a conference, but I'll go. Yeah. I found it. I would love to get it paid for, and I can come back and make a presentation so that we can add to our repertoire, right?
Right.
How do other organizations do their best practices? Let me bring those back. Am I reading? Am I staying up in my profession? I'm a student of my profession. Whatever I'm doing, I'm a student of it. I went ahead and got certified in ethics and compliance through and I don't think anybody else in my office did that, but that meant that I had access to webinars. I had access to reading materials. I went to conferences and I made a lot of contacts because if I ever had to leave, I knew people in my area that I could go to. Like you can get totally isolated doing a good job where they kind of forget where you are.
Yeah.
Or you are so seamless and it's in a good way that they don't see problems. You catch them before they become a problem, but then you don't get any credit either.
Yeah,
Nobody
because
knows that you did it. You're
those
so
types are
good.
particularly bad at pulling credit that they're due into
Mhm.
themselves.
So, part of the challenge is, to rewrite your what would I call it? Not a statement of vision, but it's like if you were going to a new job, what would you tell them you could do? Because,
Yeah.
every time I leave, I write down all that I did. I have a file. And I ask an old coworker, am I covering everything? To make sure that stuff that I just did and didn't think of, they noted. Oh no, you charged for that.
Yeah,
You
what
did
about that
that.
project? Remember that
Right.
thing? Yeah.
And so like that's the kind of relationship you want to have with a coworker who says, you left out a whole lot. Do you remember Q3 2 years ago when you
Yeah.
did all that? You don't think about it because you did it as a matter of course. And so
Right.
you want to be able to have relationships where you can get that data back, even if you don't leave, because it may make you say, well, gosh, I really liked the anxiety and stress of Q3, and I want to do more of that. I want to be the point person next time that happens. And I did such a good job. I could now advocate for that. I could be the leader of that team.
Yeah,
But
and now you have proof.
Yeah, and you forgot you did it. You forgot you did it. Or if you're not being treated well, that list is updated and you're like, okay. I haven't seen the appreciation that I need to see. And so maybe I need to start looking. But so by going to conferences, by getting a certification, by going out of my comfort zone, I meet new people because it's not just a compliance function. A lot of unregulated companies have a compliance function too. And so how can I make my experience in a regulated industry work for people who aren't regulated if I want to bring them up to a higher standard?
Or what can I borrow from those folks who are in a non-regulated industry who might be focused perhaps more on the ethics piece and the culture piece where my eyes are just on the freaking regulations. How can I incorporate some of that to really get some of that multiplicative benefit,
And if I love culture, how can I sell myself as, I got regs and culture. I got regs and culture. A lot of people don't have that, right?
Right.
Can we build culture around regs? Not just the lawyers, but everybody, having a working foundation of what we are doing here, right? Because the regs drive us in many ways and they change. And I tell companies now, I said, you really don't have an excuse not to know what the regulators value. Okay. When years ago, you would have to go to the hearing. Well, now it's all online. Somebody in your organization needs to be watching that committee in the legislature every time they meet.
Right.
Somebody needs to be watching the commission every time they meet, because you don't want to wait for it to be distilled by somebody. You want to hear it from. And so like, if you ever have to appear, or you are not thinking you have to appear, but then you hear something in the legislative hearing, you go, oh, we need to be at the next one. And that's what you take up the chain. This is what they're talking about. Maybe we're a small player and we need to have somebody in the room. How do we get that to happen? So that's where the government relations piece and regulatory and compliance can come together. You can offer that as like, hey, I saw this. This is coming down the road. It's open for note and comment. Are we going to do anything with note and comment? I'm thinking we might want to. There are ways that you can offer things. Now, some of the lawyers, and I'm a lawyer, may tell you you're out of your lane. But if you can build good relationships with one or two of them, and you can say, I want to give you my thoughts on this. It may not be that you get to stand up in the meeting of the general counsel's office, but you do get a word in there. And somebody's carrying your word. And then they might say, if they're good people and you've worked out a good relationship, we need to have Avril come in here because she's been doing some stuff that's kind of interesting.
Right.
And that's a meeting you wouldn't have been in had you not made that relationship.
Yeah, but then now you have advocates for you around the organization who are speaking your name in rooms that you're not in because of the work you've done prior. You've already proven yourself. I think that's what I keep getting struck with in this conversation is that we need to have a high agency posture. We need to take control of our lives. We need to grab the steering wheel for our lives and drive our vehicle
Mhm.
wherever we want to take it. I mean, we have the opportunity to build an off-road vehicle that can cross any kind of lane. It doesn't even have to be on the road, because that's all built by, to your point, the relationships and our vision for like what the future could be. I just find, and then something else you just described there is like saying, hey, like we're in a very unique position within our organizations because we touch a lot of things that nobody else touches. And we can
Mhm.
be this sort of unifying force to bring these disparate like fields of study, so to speak, together in a new, in a new way that can really move the needle for the organization. So again, like you just kind of off the top of your head brainstormed like, well, what if we had a culture around regulations? Well, that's a great melding of the sweet and the salty. That's a great melding of something that, if done properly and there's the right engagement, can really de-risk an organization in a meaningful way that can turn into a competitive advantage in the marketplace or whatever. And so yeah, go ahead. No, please, please.
No, I was going to say, and thinking out of the box, because when I first started doing ethics training, I said, I can do this on video too, and people can access it anytime they want. So I create a training for a particular office. And then I go do it in person so they can ask questions. And then there's a video of me so they can reach out. And so what I did was build a client base where people would stop me in the hallway
Because
and
they
they
knew
would
you.
say, they knew me, that I had
Yeah.
been on all the videos, right? And then they'll say something like, well, Avril, I want you to do my ethics advice. I trust you. I know you. So
Mhm.
I'm bringing in people that don't want to work with anybody else. Now, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Now, your peers may not like it, but they don't mind because you know the people well enough, and you're not starting from scratch every time they have a question for you. But it
Right.
also means that she's integral to our office. She's not going to lose her job. If we cut back, she's not going anywhere because everybody knows her. She's the ethics lady. I went to a holiday party. I'm dancing. A lady comes up to me. You're the ethics lady. I've seen you online. That was a holiday party. And I just
Yeah.
laughed. I said, well, yeah, it must be the haircut, right? People remember the haircut. But, and then when I started talking about let's save money, you say it'll be expensive to train everybody. We could do this and video it and people could watch it. We could, like, that doesn't cost very much. And we have a video studio in the basement. We could use it for that. And so then I get to know all the people who do media, right?
Right.
And then they asked me, would you come in and do a talk that we could tape for executives who want to give speeches on video? Because you do it so often, you do a good job. Can you talk about how they should present themselves? And and I said, sure. And so then
Right.
I become known to leaders in the organization that I never interact with, but they've seen my video about how to give a speech, how to teach people anything, how to make your message stick. And they were like, oh, I've never met that lady, but now we know her. And so the
Yep.
media people said, could you come in and do some coaching if we asked you? I'm sure, So like these are the kinds of things that maybe my supervisor can't really say no to because I'm getting my work done.
Yep.
And the higher ups are asking for me. And so like then I've got a whole new world of people who know me for whatever reason, right?
Right.
And then it means you have the confidence to say, maybe I've done all I can here. Maybe I can take this elsewhere. Maybe
Yep.
these other folks will be references for something other than ethics and compliance. So then you have a new world open to you. Because like when I started to do my outside board activity where I was going into leadership, and I told myself, you need to do leadership. Because a lady I knew through my sorority came up to me one time. She goes, you need to be doing more. And she's like, I'm in a community service organization. I need to see you out here. You're doing a lot on your job and I get it, but I need to see you out here. So she encouraged me to join this community foundation board. And so, I started, talking to people, getting in rooms where I hadn't been, meeting other board members who did different kinds of work. And so
Yep.
then I get invited to stuff, and then I'm getting invitations to things that I hadn't been going to, and then making relationships across a broad swathe of my community, people who would never know me through work, And so then I start thinking, I want to make this into a paid engagement. How can I do that? So then I started doing a little public speaking in the community. Some of it was free for the people who couldn't afford it, but those that wanted to pay, hey, great, And then I said, I want to get on paid boards. And so then I joined the National Association of Corporate Directors. And then now I am the chair of the advisory board for the DC Metro chapter. So then I have all kinds of stuff that I'm doing through them.
You're a killer, man.
Well, but because it's fun and I'm
smart.
enjoying it.
Yeah, it's smart, but it's also fun, to your point, and it also feeds you and it builds your toolbox and it makes you indispensable. I mean, these are all the things that we need to lay a strong foundation for our careers,
And what I say to people who do governance, it is not visible, but it undergirds everything. And so
Right.
you can say that to people and see, now my focus is AI governance. I do governance, but I do AI governance. And I talk to people about how to set up your AI governance framework. I'm totally interested in it. I go to these conferences, I geek out on this stuff, but I also have a good communication style. I'm not based in the data. I'm the lawyer talking about how to set this up. Right. And who needs to be on your team as you set up your framework, and how do you guys communicate well together? And so that's a whole other area that if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would never have predicted, right? And so what I'm doing is looking to be on boards to build that in the companies that I join. I'm not a consultant in AI. I do this because I want to meet people who are on boards who need this viewpoint, because I'm also a lawyer and I do governance and I've been on audit committees. And I've also been on nominations governance. And so I'm building out the whole thing so that if you ask me about a governance question, I can answer it. If you ask me about audit, now I'm not a financial person. I don't have the financial expert behind my name. But I've said to people, well, if you can't explain it to all of the audit committee members, you can't take it to the full board. And I'm the non-financial person that it needs to be clear to me before we can make this presentation. And so that's a great help to the audit committee, because they're like, we're all finance people and we thought it was clear. And I'm like,
we all speak this language. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
That's right. So I'm an interpreter in different areas.
That's right.
And if you have a risk committee, because I've done compliance and ethics, I'm like, well, I'm a good person to help you kind of look at your risk. What's our risk appetite as an organization? Because see, a lot of people, when I went to my government agency and I said, you're vulnerable if you don't train everybody, I said, what's your risk appetite? Are you willing to go that risky? You can do that. It's a decision.
Right.
But I think.
But now you've had the conversation.
We've had the conversation and we've thought about it. If we decide to go that way, fine. But if we haven't talked about it, that's the bigger risk. You haven't even had the discussion about what will we be willing to put up with in terms of our risk to get this accomplished. And that's a new way of looking at it. If people haven't thought of it that way, that's something that blows their minds. They're like, I thought we had this covered, but maybe we don't.
Well, yeah. And just like forcing the conversation forces the conversation. It forces everyone to kind of express what they think a high, medium, or low risk is. And like collectively, are we on the same page?
And see, I'm good. If you don't choose to do what I suggest, I'm a team player. I'm good. But I also understand the risk level. And as a board member, I'm like, is this the board I need to be on if they're going that high with the risk? You can make those decisions and it helps other people around the table make the decision.
Right.
You don't leave a board because you don't like the risk appetite. What you do is you say, well, what are we doing to mitigate? That's the question. Right. And if there's not enough being done, then you have a decision to make. But most organizations want to mitigate. They're not, now startups, startups do a little more risk, and you got to get used to that. It's a whole different, the way we think in a startup, and they don't do as much governance. So you got to be okay with that if you're going to be on a startup board. But I just think that there's a lot that we offer that people may have been boxed in. They didn't realize what's out there. And so you have to be thinking all the time, what's my special offer? What do I do that nobody else is doing? And if I do what nobody else is doing, I'll always have resources and opportunity. And I'm telling you, it may not get you a lot of lucre right away, but you're growing and you're building and you're getting to the place where you can command your price. If you want to be a consultant on this stuff, people are like, well, hey, we need you. And they'll bring you in and get you to talk about it because they have not thought this through. And so as organizations grow and as they constrict, we in our area, which often is cut first, need to be always conscious of what else, well, how can I land on my feet?
Mm-hmm.
And what conferences do I need to go to meet the people who will take me on?
Yep. And we're part of this really great community where there's so much potential for that, right? Like this is a really ripe community to build meaningful relationships in with people that you've never met before. And I
Exactly.
think it's a lot more collegial than a lot of other industries that I've been a part of.
You're
And then
right.
I also paradoxically see us as individual participants in it not taking advantage of it to the extent that they could. And
Well,
something
and
else.
I believe that. I believe that. I think that, if you look at, I can't tell what's going to happen in the next few years, but I will say it may be more difficult to encourage ethics and compliance in the time we find ourselves in. We're looking at regulators being shut down. We're looking at, and we know we've always waxed and waned in terms of regulatory, like it gets really heavy at one point, then it goes real light. But I think we're looking at maybe no regs or very, very few regs, or if there are regs, a different attitude about enforcement. And so we have to think differently as we talk about ethics and compliance, because if there is no stick, what's the carrot? And how do we help people see the carrot in ethics and compliance when they don't fear the regulator?
Well, look, I mean, if your brand in your company is merely, I'm going to keep you out of jail, if that's the only value, if your usefulness can all hang on that single hook, then you should probably be a little nervous right now. But if you've been smart and you've built those relationships and you've shown yourself to be useful and you're striving toward that indispensability because you've built these relationships and you've articulated your value in the context of the business and connected those things, then you're in a much better position. Like organizations don't want to get rid of great people. But I think a lot of times, to the extent they do, it's usually because those great people haven't made it known to those who they need to make it known to that they're actually great. And part of that is, again, relationship building. Part of it is being able to point specifically to like the value that you've provided. And this has been really, man, I could talk to you for a whole hour. I know we're a little bit over here. Or a whole nother hour is what I mean.
Well, I've enjoyed it. And, I just want to encourage people to, look inside and think about what you would like, and then look around and see where you can start to get what you want.
Well, it's there for you. I mean, it sounds trite, but like, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. And one other thing you said, this might run long, sorry. One other thing you said is like, it might not give you lucre now. You might not get enriched by it today by doing these extra things, but there is a universal law of reaping and sowing. And if you sow those good seeds, you're going to have a good harvest at some point. And I also find, what struck me throughout our entire conversation was your willingness to do things, outside of work hours. I'll just put quotes around that. Reading books, becoming a student of the industry, the game, the student of, the company, willing to take these nonprofit board positions because you felt like all those things, I believe, were all adding to your toolbox and putting you in situations in different rooms with different groups of people that would allow for you, that would allow these opportunities that now you're taking advantage of and have taken advantage of to present themselves. Like you have to do something different. You got to get out of, to your point, you got to get out of the box that you might find yourself in if you're going to create some different circumstances for success for yourself.
Yeah, and I think, in an operational role, you're great at that. But I also, when I was chair of the board of this nonprofit that was going through changes, I got a lot more operational experience in areas like, the back office and how we pay bills, how we raise money. And like when you go to a corporate board, you don't need to raise money. But these are things that you learn about, like I did a couple CEO searches. I did one for that nonprofit and I did one for the Economic Development Commission, national searches. So in my role, in my job, I would not have had that opportunity. Now, I did it years ago as part of a nonprofit where I was a staff person, but you had a different role as a staffer talking about who are we going to hire as my boss, right? I'm hiring someone who works for the organization, who works for me as chair of the board. And so then it's a different role. So, and that's a big part of corporate board service, you have to be able to hire and fire a CEO.
It's part of it.
And so,
Do
like,
not
if you
tell
haven't
my
had
board that they can fire me, though, please. Let's not.
I got it. But all of these things add to, like you said, a cornucopia, right? Of
Yep.
all of your skills, a repertoire that you can pull out when you need it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you've built those bridges to these other loci of power within the organization to solidify your own position to a greater degree. Man.
And I think I've tried to raise the consciousness in the organization I've been in of governance, ethics, compliance. Like, that's a role that maybe they hadn't had anybody who did that before on their boards.
Well, again, like when you have that drive for clarity, I just find a lot of us, we'll just kind of present some information, or I see this in sales a lot, where someone will just be like, they're kind of leaving it to the person on the other side of the conversation to like do all the calculus and make those connections. Mm-hmm. And many times I think that's where a lot of miscommunication comes from, because it's like, I thought I delivered the message, but I didn't really deliver it super clear. And I think this desire for clarity to make sure that, look, you can disagree with it if you want, but like, let's at least present the clarity that, this ethics and this governance and this compliance all does feed into who we are as an organization. And if we can activate these things, it should allow for us to achieve our mission in a more effective way, in a more efficient way, right? Making that connection and trying to strive for that clarity, as opposed to what I see a lot of people do, especially people who seem to like lose control of their career and it doesn't have that same sort of trajectory that they want. I think ostensibly what they've done is they've sort of sat back and they've just assumed that either someone's going to advocate for them, or they've just assumed that, everyone's going to see all these little things that they're doing that are going to stack up to the noble corporate citizen that they are. And I think people are just so self-absorbed. They're fighting their own fires. It's hard for people to lift their head up from their desk and see, all the good work that's going on around them. And it's not because they're pieces of garbage, it's just because they're human beings. So it is incumbent on us to blaze that trail for our career. And it is incumbent on us to make sure that that calculus is done in the minds of the people who matter,
And to prioritize your own learning, prioritize it.
Good point.
And if you can, get in front of your board, make the report. Like usually it's the chief compliance officer, and they may get there if the chief legal officer is permitting that. There's got to be a way for you to share your understanding and to get that experience. And see, because of where I was in my organization, I did speak to some of the top people, but it was because I had done the media stuff. I had done the ethics stuff that went over the heads of the people that were my immediate supervisors. That's how I got in front. It's a risk. It's a risk. But the thing is, then they know you by name and they're like, hi, Avril. They know who I was, right? It's a risk. And so if you can't get in front of your own leadership at your company, do something outside your job that gets you in front of leadership in another organization so that you can practice making those kinds of presentations that you want to become good at.
So good. My gosh. Where can people find you and learn some more about you and follow you, all that kind of stuff? Because, man, this is really a great episode.
Check me out on LinkedIn. Yeah.
That's where I met you.
Well, we were at conferences too.
That is true. That is true.
Sure
yeah, but I feel like the most time I've spent with you has been on LinkedIn.
Yes, we do. We do converse quite a bit. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And I just send greetings to all your listeners. And I hope that something I said might be useful to you.
Well, it was useful to me for sure. So very good. We'll see you next time.